Look, so I know I don't typically upload videos on the weekend, or, well, being that it's almost 12 a.m., I guess it counts as a Monday. But there's something I need to say about the way parts of the Royal High community have been acting lately, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to be nice, and I'm probably going to say something that is likely going to offend some of you, but you're becoming tone deaf. And before anybody sits there and tries to twist my words, this isn't me saying that you're not allowed to be disappointed. You are allowed to dislike an update. You are 100% allowed to think that there wasn't enough content. You are allowed to miss the way updates used to be, and you're 100% allowed to criticize a game, including Royal High. But criticism isn't even the problem anymore, and it's nowhere near criticism by definition. The problem is when the disappointment over a Roblox update becomes more important to you than the fact that there were actual human beings behind the game who have just experienced something horrific. Because some of you are looking at the death of Vianci, a developer who has worked for Royal High for 5+ years now, looking at developers and coworkers who have lost someone they knew and worked alongside, and your response is initially, okay, but where's the update? They need to push past it. Why should we care? We still didn't get what we were promised. It's been long enough. First off, a sneak peek does not mean you're promised to it. And honestly, I think you all need to genuinely stop and think about what you're saying. A person died. Not a delayed update, not a canceled item, not a fictional character, a real person. And you're expecting the people around them to just clock back in, ignore their grief, and continue producing content for you because you didn't get enough hairstyles, a diamond set, a new realm, or whatever else you possibly expected. That's not criticism. That's not holding the developers accountable. That is a complete lack of empathy. And I don't think some of you actually understand what grief can do to a person, but I do. I've experienced the loss of loved ones. I've experienced losing a coworker, and I watched my own father lie in a hospital bed, brain dead, unable to hear me, unable to respond, being kept alive, kept breathing by a machine so that we could have the illusion that he was still alive. I saw his face, I saw his body, and when you experience something like that, you don't wake up the next morning and go, well, that happened, better get back to work. That isn't how grief works. I bawled for hours, for days. I couldn't sleep properly for months because I kept seeing him, his face, his body, that hospital room. Even when you're physically somewhere else, your brain can still be stuck there. You can be trying to work and suddenly remember. You can be trying to sleep and suddenly see them again. You can hear a song, see something they liked, walk past a place that reminds you of them, and suddenly you're right back in that moment. Grief can affect your sleep, your concentration, your memory, your motivation, your ability to think clearly. Things that normally take you 10 minutes can suddenly feel impossible. I cried so hard that my eyes were almost swollen shut. So when I see people saying that the developers need to just push past the death of someone they know, who died a horrific death that was broadcasted everywhere, that gets made fun of on social medias, that got turned into memes? Memes! I honestly don't know how you can say that and not hear how cruel it sounds. And I think some of you need a history lesson too. For much of human history, mourning was understood to take time. In different cultures, people observed formal mourning periods that could last days, weeks, months, and even sometimes years. Entire communities participated in funerals and rituals because people understood that death was not something you simply got over by the next update cycle. And even now, grief doesn't come with a universal expiration date. There's no magical point where someone wakes up and says, all right, I'm done grieving now. There's no current number of days. There's no current number of weeks. No deadline where their pain becomes inconvenient enough for you to demand they put it aside. And honestly, the fact that some of you are upset, about not receiving enough digital content, then they are capable of showing even the smallest amount of compassion towards grieving human beings is deeply concerning. Again, you can be disappointed, and I need people to understand that I'm not saying you're required to love every update. I'm not saying you have to pretend everything is perfect. I'm not saying developers should never be criticized, but there's a massive difference between saying, I'm disappointed with this update and I hope they add more when they're able, and saying, I don't care that someone died, they need to get over it and give us what we want. One is criticism and one is entitlement. And some of you have become so obsessed with what Royal High owes you that you have forgotten that the developers are people first. People with friends, families, coworkers they care about, people who can lose someone and have their entire world turned upside down. You don't know what conversations happen behind the scenes. You don't know how close Vianci was to every individual developer. You don't know who is still struggling. You don't know who is trying to work while barely holding themselves together. And frankly, you are not entitled to. They don't have to publicly perform their grief to prove that they are affected enough. They don't need to provide you with a breakdown of exactly how sad they are before you're willing to allow them a moment to breathe. A human died. That should be enough. In the Twitter comments, in this video's thumbnail, those aren't made up. These are real comments. And they're not just a small fraction. There are thousands of comments I have seen people insulting developers, demanding more, and acting as though grief is an inconvenience getting in their way of entertainment. And that's the part that frustrates me the most. Because you can scroll past someone talking about a death and then immediately start demanding a new set. You can see people explain that developers are grieving and respond with, okay, but I wanted an update. You can watch actual human beings go through something devastating and somehow you make yourself the victim because a Roblox game didn't meet your expectations. Read that again if you need to. Listen to it again if you need to. Your disappointment over a game doesn't outweigh the number of other people's grief. A delayed feature is not more important than someone's death. Your $0, or even if the money you chose to spend voluntarily, you chose to spend it, you chose to type those numbers in, does not purchase ownership over the developers as human beings. They are not machines. They are not content factories. They cannot press a button and turn off grief because the community is getting impatient. So yeah, be disappointed. Give feedback. Criticize the game when criticism is deserved. But for the love of God, have some humanity. Because one day, if you're lucky enough to love people deeply, you may also experience what it means to lose them. You will also learn what it feels to receive a phone call that changes your life. You may sit in a hospital room wishing someone would wake up. You may spend nights unable to sleep because you won't stop replaying what you saw. You may go days crying, months struggling, and years later, you will still have moments where it hurts just as much as it did before. And when that happens, I pray. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemies. I really hope that nobody looks at you and tells you to push past it, because they want you to get back to producing something for them. This community talks constantly about wanting transportation and communication from developers, but what is the point of asking developers to be honest with you when they are honest about something painful and your response is to attack them for not working fast enough? What kind of community are you becoming? If empathy only exists when the tragedy is entertaining enough for you. You don't know Vianci personally. Some of you do. Some of you who watch my content do. But you don't have the right to acknowledge that his death isn't devastating. You don't have to stop wanting updates forever. You don't have to suddenly agree with every decision the developers make. You just need to understand one very basic fact. Grief is not an inconvenience. Death is not a minor delay. And developers are human beings before they are developers. So before you post one of those nasty comments, before you tell someone to get over it, before you demand they push past the death of someone they knew because you want more pixels on your screen, stop. Maybe think and ask yourself whether you're criticizing a game or whether you have become so detached from the human beings behind it that you no longer recognize when your disappointment has turned into something cruel. Because right now, a part of this community desperately needs to hear it. You are allowed to be disappointed, but you are not entitled to someone's grief ending on your schedule. And if you think a Roblox update is enough to demand that grieving people simply push past a death, then yes, you are becoming tone deaf.